Yes.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Can you please state and spell your name for the record?
I'm Detective Benjamin McLean, M-A-C-L-E-A-N,
Where do you work?
with the Osceola County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you been employed with that agency collectively?
Collectively, for just shy of 8 years.
Okay. And you said you're a detective?
Yes.
In what unit?
I work in the Violent Crimes Unit
How long have you been assigned to that role?
for 1 year.
And what does a detective in the Violent Crimes Unit do?
We investigate crimes involving homicide, attempted homicide, unattended deaths, suicide, and any major cases.
What did you do before that?
Before that, I was a detective with the Special Victims Unit. I was there for about a year as well, investigating crimes against children and sexually motivated crimes.
How about before that?
Before that, I was on the crisis response team. It's a unit designed to respond to people suffering with mental health conditions, substance abuse concerns, and that's through outreach services.
Okay. And then did you ever serve as a dispatcher with the sheriff's office as well?
Yes, before I was sworn as a deputy, I was a dispatcher for 2 years before transitioning to the academy, getting a law enforcement certificate and serving as a patrol deputy.
Were you working on duty with the Osceola County Sheriff's Office on February 27th of 2022?
Yes, I was.
What was your actual position at that particular time?
I was a patrol deputy assigned as a field training officer.
And what did your roles entail at that particular time as part of patrol?
We would respond to 911 calls for service. We would patrol assigned areas within our jurisdiction. We generally just help the public make arrests where violations have occurred and assist where we could.
Did you respond to an event that had taken place at the Wawa gas station located at 3951 Central Florida Parkway, which is located in Orlando on that day?
Yes, I did.
And were you in your full uniform?
Yes, I was.
Were you in a patrol vehicle?
Yes.
Is that a marked patrol car?
Yes,
Is it equipped with lights and sirens?
it is.
Was anyone with you?
Yes, I had a recruit who was with me.
Do you recall who that was?
I was Deputy Dominguez.
Were you wearing a body camera video, and did you have one at that time?
Yes, I was.
Can you explain for the jury where the body camera video would be located on your uniform back in February of 2022?
It would have been in the center of my uniform around where the navel is.
Do you recall how your body camera video became activated at any point?
I don't remember, I'm afraid.
Was it a situation where you could manually turn it on?
Yes, there's multiple ways that I'm able to activate it through initiating the lights or the siren in the car, through manually pushing a button, through starting to run, through being laid down for too long. It will activate.
Do you recall if you actually drove to the Wawa with your lights and sirens activated on this occasion?
I don't remember, I'm afraid.
Okay. Now, when you arrive on scene, what is the first thing that you observed?
I remember seeing deputies on the floor struggling with a person who we've been looking for.
And the deputies that you mentioned, who were they?
Deputy Crawford and Deputy Kofinas.
Is it fair to say you were the third person on scene or something else?
Yes, I was the third person on scene.
What did you do upon your arrival?
I assisted. I went to put my hands on the male to assist in the apprehension.
Can you describe generally where this was taking place, where Deputy Crawford and Kafinas had what you refer to as the suspect, Mr. Barretto, on the ground?
It was on the ground in the parking lot of the Wawa gas station adjacent to where you would fill it with gas adjacent to the pumps.
Were there other cars around?
Yes, there were.
And specifically where they had him on the ground, so meaning Mr. Barretto, were there vehicles around that particular area?
Yes, there were.
Normal cars, anything else that you recall?
There were cars, patrol cars. There was people around. There was the motorcycle on which the person we were apprehending had been riding.
Where was the motorcycle in reference to where Mr. Barretto is on the ground and Deputy Kafinas and Crawford are on top of him?
It was on the opposite side of the pumps where we were trying to apprehend him.
What was the positioning of the motorcycle?
It was laying down.
Did you observe any gasoline upon your arrival to that situation?
On my arrival, I didn't observe any gas.
Now, were you issued a taser at this time?
Yes, I was.
Did you deploy your taser?
No.
Did you see any tasers or observe the usage of any tasers that day?
I didn't in the moment watching my body camera. Afterwards, I did.
Objection, Your Honor. Refresh.
You may.
Okay, so at this point, Deputy Kafinas and Crawford are already on top of Mr. Barretto.
Correct.
Okay. Was there much space around? Can you describe kind of the layout of that scene for the jury?
We were laying face down on the concrete. I remember Deputy Crawford and Deputy Kafinas were on top of him, struggling with him. And I was able to get through between one of the kind of bollards that blocks where the pumps are and the actual pumps, and assist from that empty area by holding onto his arm.
And you said you had a body camera video at this time issued to you.
Yes, I did.
Was it working and operable
Yeah.
prior to this occasion and on this occasion?
Yes.
Permission to approach the clerk? Showing the defense what has been pre-marked as states F for identification. Permission to approach the witness?
You may.
Detective, I'm going to show you a CD. Do you recognize this?
I do, yes.
What is this?
And this is a recording from my body camera.
Did you watch it prior to testifying today?
I did, yes.
Does it fairly and accurately depict the events that occurred on February 27th of 2022 when you arrived to that scene?
Yes.
Okay, and your initials, and I see your initials on there, is it dated?
It is, yes.
The state would now move what has been pre-marked as states F into evidence as state 6.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, what was pre-marked as states Exhibit F will be admitted as states 5, and you may, or excuse me, states 6, and you may publish.
Thank you.
You're always saying 5, I have 6.
It's 6.
Okay, sorry. I was just about to say.
No, I corrected it.
Thank you.
If we could
Of course.
Thank you so much. Did you just hear that sound?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what that is?
That's the arcing of a taser.
And we have the video paused at the 23-second marker. For real time, it's 17:53:49 Eastern Standard Time. Do you recognize the deputy in the video here where it's paused?
Yes.
Who is that?
That's Deputy Crawford.
Okay. Do you know who the individual right below him is?
Yes.
Who is that?
That's Deputy Kofinas.
Okay. At this point, is Mr. Barretto on the ground?
Yes, he is.
Okay. Is Mr. Barretto underneath where both of these deputies are crouched over or kneeling?
Yes, he is.
So we just heard somebody yell something out. What was that?
Killed the pump.
And was there a mention of gas?
Yes.
Do you recognize anything or know who that voice is?
In the moment, I didn't know who it was.
Are you familiar with Deputy Kofinas and his voice?
I am, yes.
Is that Deputy Kofinas' voice?
No.
Okay. Whose voice is that, to your knowledge?
Deputy.
I'm going to pause the video at the 31-second mark, which is 17:53:57. There's liquid on the ground. Do you know what that is? Did you make any observations about that?
In the moment, no.
Okay. Does that appear to be gasoline?
It does, yes.
Could you smell anything or observe anything else about the gasoline?
In the moment, no.
We can have the lights turned on. Now, we just watched your body camera video from that day. Does it appear that the takedown had already been initiated prior to you arriving at that Wawa?
Yes.
And are other backup units coming, or are they on the way?
Yes, other units are coming to the parking lot and they're on the way.
And we saw a fire go off and we heard a taser be deployed at some point on your body camera video.
Objection, Your Honor. Pleading and testifying.
Overruled.
You testified that the sound that we heard in the video from your body camera video is a taser?
Correct.
Okay. And you observed that taser to go off next to the gas pump that we just observed in your body camera video?
In the moment, I didn't know that that's what had happened, but having watched my body camera,
Objection, Your Honor. May we approach?
You may.
Now, we also saw in the video, and you recall the motorcycle having been tipped over and on its side.
correct.
Now, did you go hands-on besides what we observed in your body camera video?
No.
Okay. Was there much room to do anything between the gas pump and the vehicle that is depicted on your body camera video?
Not from where I was.
And did you deploy your taser that day?
No.
Why not?
I arrived and saw two deputies in a struggle with somebody attempting to resist their arrest. So I assisted by going hands-on with them to effect the arrest.
May I have a moment to confer?
You may.
You advised before that you have previously been assigned to I believe you said the crisis response team, and you have worked at the sheriff's office since 2019, or is that inaccurate?
I've been sworn as a deputy since 2019 and I've worked with the sheriff's office since 2017.
Are you trained on any de-escalation tactics?
Yes, I am.
And what, if any, did you observe take place before that fire erupted?
De-escalation can happen in many different ways. It's not always verbal. Sometimes de-escalating somebody from harming themselves or others does mean de-escalating physically. And that's what I attempted to do, was to physically restrain, pry out his arm to prevent him from endangering anybody else.
Would de-escalation include attempts to go hands-on or utilize any other tactics before the deployment of a taser?
When time as well as the distance of the subject allows, we're able to verbally de-escalate or attempt to verbally de-escalate somebody.
May I have a moment? I have no further questions at this time.
Mr. Barber.
Good afternoon, Detective. So you were just talking a little bit about de-escalation techniques, correct?
Correct.
And you've received training on those?
I have, yes.
And as a field training officer, you would actually train other people on some of those as well, right?
I would, yes.
And according to Osceola County Sheriff's Office policies, verbally threatening to use force against someone is a valid de-escalation technique, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Let's say, tase someone, that's not necessarily a statement of what they're intending to do then, right?
Not necessarily.
Because sometimes you threaten, as an officer, you threaten use of force to try to gain compliance, correct?
Correct.
And specifically maybe gain compliance from a suspect who's resisting arrest?
Correct.
And have you also received training in regards to tasers and their proper use?
Yes, I have.
And do you receive that training through the sheriff's office?
Yes.
Do they touch on that in the academy as well?
They do.
When you were receiving training through the police academy, are you taught about a concept called muscle memory?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury what muscle memory is?
By no means am I an expert in this, but it would be a response that the body does from having done that particular task several times in the past. It would almost be a spontaneous thing.
So would it be fair to say that law enforcement officers are trained to do the same tasks the same way every single time so that it becomes muscle memory?
To an extent.
And are officers taught to practice drawing their weapons over and over the same way in order to obtain muscle memory?
Again, to an extent, there are many different scenarios that could happen. We are trained to anticipate any scenario.
But muscle memory is something that officers are taught that to use in the field.
Yes.
Is that because officers sometimes find themselves in fast-moving situations?
Yes.
Situations where they don't have time to think?
Yes.
Situations where they just have to rely on their training and act immediately?
Yes.
Now, before you arrived at the Wawa, you were listening to the transmissions coming over the police radio, right?
Correct, yes.
And those transmissions concerned the suspect who was eventually detained at the Wawa, Berto Vallarta, correct?
Yes.
And those transmissions, did those transmissions include a description of the subject?
Objection, may we approach?
Human?
Were you So, Deputy, did you receive I think this is where I was at, did you receive a description of the suspect that you guys were looking for?
Yes.
Yeah. And was that the suspect that you guys eventually detained at the Wawa?
Yes.
And that was Mr. Berto Vallarta?
It was.
Okay. Now, when you were listening to the radio traffic prior to arriving at the Wawa, were you receiving descriptions of his conduct on the roadways?
Yes.
And did that include the fact that he had fled from a traffic stop?
Yes.
And did it include the fact that he was doing wheelies?
Yes.
And that he was driving through red lights?
Yes.
And that he was driving over sidewalks?
Yes.
And that he was, in general, driving recklessly, correct?
Correct.
So when you arrived at the Wawa, you were there to assist in apprehending a criminal suspect, correct?
Yes.
And that person specifically was Mr. Berto Vallarta?
It was, yes.
Now before, when the state was talking with you, they had asked you about whether you had your lights and sirens on when you arrived. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And I believe you indicated you couldn't remember.
Correct.
Okay. Did you write a report in this incident? Or for this incident, be a better way of saying that?
Yes, I did.
Thank you. Would it perhaps help refresh your memory about whether your lights and sirens are activated if you could take a look at your report?
Yes, it would.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Do you recognize this detective?
I do, yes.
And what do you recognize that as?
I recognize this is my report.
And I would specifically draw your attention to the last paragraph. If you could read that to yourself, please. Does that help refresh your memory as to whether or not your lights and sirens were activated when you arrived?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So when you arrived at the Wawa, were your lights and sirens activated?
No, they will not.
And is that because you did not want to alert the suspect to your presence?
Yes, it was.
And is that because you thought if he was alerted to your presence, he would recklessly flee again?
Yes.
And were you concerned that that could put road users in danger?
Yes.
So essentially you were trying to sneak up on him.
To an extent.
And as a law enforcement officer, you receive training on how you're supposed to apprehend certain types of suspects,
Yes.
depending on maybe the risk that they pose to officers and civilians.
Yes.
Would a suspect who was actively fleeing from police be somebody that would cause you concern when you're going to apprehend them?
Yes.
And is that the kind of person that you would want to apprehend without them being alerted to your presence?
Objection, may we approach?
You may.
Excuse me. Going back to your training, were you trained as a law enforcement officer that if you're trying to detain a suspect who's fled from police, that you should try to do so in a manner in which you're not alerting them to your presence?
Not solely, but that's one of the ways that we can apprehend them.
And that was the way that you were trying to do it in this case, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Now, you testified before on directs that you tried to assist with Deputy Kafinas and Deputy Crawford in securing the suspect, correct?
Correct.
Specifically, were you trying to grab his right arm and remove it from underneath him?
Yes, I was.
And where was his right hand at that time?
It was underneath his waist, stomach area.
And Mr. Director Baerga, he did not comply with your efforts, did he?
No.
And he continued to resist all the way up until the moment the fire started, correct?
Yes.
Were you concerned by the fact that you could not get his hand out from where his waistband was?
I was, yes.
And why is that?
The initial reason that we had responded to the call was
Objection, may we approach?
You may. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a brief recess. I've got to talk to the lawyers about something outside of your presence. So at this time, I'm going to have the deputies escort you back into the jury room, and we will bring you back just as soon as we can. Okay. So the issue, once again, is the issue of the firearm and the motion in limine that was entered before the trial started. Ms. Walker?
Yes, Your Honor. So, does Your Honor want me to instruct the witness or me to instruct?
Well, I guess I wanted to have the broader conversation because you said you had concerns about him testifying at all about why he was concerned that the victim, his hands were in his waistband.
Well, I think the bigger concern is the questioning that had just been posed at the bench as a hypothetical question, or the next question that Mr. Garner wanted to ask, which was about weapons. He had the word weapons posed as concern. Deputies, how concerned they would be with the mention of that over in radio traffic control. And with the line of questioning that's been posed already to this witness, I think that, as I was mentioning at the bench, that's a concern because they're talking about Mr. Barretto, which would be a violation of the motion in limine in Your Honor's previous ruling. So I think that the state has concerns about the way that the questions are being asked, but of course we would like to now instruct the witness to remind you to not mention the firearm at all.
So, the deputy or Detective McLean, there was an order entered by the court prior to the start of the trial that the witnesses may not talk about the existence of a firearm unless a proper predicate has been laid. So if that was information that you received over the radio or in response to the call, you can't mention that when you're testifying today. Okay? In terms of your concern about him speaking specifically about Mr. Barretto having a firearm, he is not allowed to talk or testify about that. But I do not think that it would be impermissible for him to speak about, because your question was why he was concerned that the defendant had his hands there. I think he can answer the question, generally speaking, of why a deputy or a police officer might be concerned about not being able to see a suspect's hands, right?
Right.
But not specific to this defendant.
Exactly. I'm not asking about, I'm not trying to get into the aggravated assault at all, Judge. I'm just trying to establish that deputies are trained that people sometimes carry weapons in their waistline, and that if somebody's hands are there and they can't get control of them, that generally speaking, that's a risk, that's a danger. They gotta try to secure those hands. I'm just trying to get through the training. I'm not trying to get anything specific about the aggravated assault in this case. But I thought the training was relevant, because in general, that is a concern all deputies would have.
All right. Do you understand the instruction, Detective? Okay. Anything else, Ms. Walker?
Yeah, Your Honor.
All right.
Could I, since the jury is out, I just do a quick bathroom break, Judge?
Sure.
Thank you. Deputy McCurry.
Jury entering.
Mr. Barber, you may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. So, Deputy McCurry, Detective McLean, sorry. Sorry, I'm just getting my. Did you have any concerns about the fact that you cannot remove the suspect's hand from his waistline area?
Yes.
Do law enforcement officers, did you receive any training as a law enforcement officer about that subject?
Yes.
And what is that, generally speaking?
We like to see people's hands. See their hands. It can pose a risk to us.
And is that because you don't know whether or not any given suspect has a weapon in their waistline?
Yes.
Don't look. I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
All right, Debbie, I just want to show you a couple parts of this video. Are you able to see that, Deputy?
Yes.
Yes,
And who is that right there?
And that's Deputy Kofinas.
Okay, and are you able to observe what's in his hand?
That's a taser.
And at this exact moment, what does it appear he's doing with that taser?
It appears like he's holding it.
And are you able to view that picture well?
I can see it, yes.
Okay. Do you agree that this still shot depicts Deputy Kofinas' taser laying on the ground?
I see the taser on the ground. I don't know if it is one. I don't know if it still is one. To see it there.
Right, but you see at least a taser on the ground, correct?
Correct.
And just 2 seconds before this, taking note of the time, there was a taser in Deputy Kofinas' hand, correct?
Correct.
Right. And you didn't see anyone else ever draw a taser during the incident, right?
No, I didn't.
And where is the suspect in relation to this picture?
His head is towards that bollard you can see on the right.
Is that it right there?
Correct.
So then his body's facing this way.
Correct.
And so this is the right side of his body, correct?
Correct.
And so that taser is on the ground right next to the suspect, right?
Correct.
Right next to his right arm?
Yes.
The arm that no one was ever able to secure?
Yes.
And in fact, if you look, can you see any space in between the taser and the suspect's body?
Yeah, a little gap, yeah.
Would you say it is directly next to the suspect's right arm?
Yes.
After the fire ignited, was there still a struggle with the suspect after that point?
No.
Did the fire pretty much end that entire ordeal on the ground?
Yes.
Was anyone else doing anything at that time other than trying to put out fires?
I can't speak for what everybody else was doing. That's what I was doing.
Did you observe Deputy Crawford on fire?
Not in the moment, no.
It's fair. Thank you. Now, I want to go back to your training a little bit. As a law enforcement officer, in your training to become a law enforcement officer, are you trained to always maintain control of your weapons during a struggle with a criminal suspect?
Yes.
Are there risks involved in losing control of your weapon while you're struggling with a criminal suspect?
Yes.
And what are the dangers posed by that?
The weapons could be used against us.
And if a weapon is within easy reach of a suspect who's resisting arrest, does law enforcement training tell you to remove the weapon from their reach?
Yes.
Now, based on all your training experience as a law enforcement officer, during physical struggles, do weapons, such as tasers or firearms, sometimes get discharged on accident?
Repeat the question.
Yes, based on all your training and experience as a law enforcement officer, is it possible during physical struggles with criminal suspects that weapons can be accidentally discharged?
It's possible.
Now, you testified before about using the threat of force as a technique to gain compliance or de-escalate, correct?
Correct.
Now, I think we discussed earlier about verbally stating that somebody's going to use force, right?
Yes, verbal de-escalation.
Now, as a detective, the Osceola County Sheriff's Office, and a field training officer, are you familiar with Osceola County Sheriff's Office policies?
I am, yes.
And are you familiar with their policies related to tasers?
Yes, I am.
And are you familiar with their policies related to response to resistance?
I am, yes.
And I believe it's response to resistance and aggression, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. According to Osceola County Sheriff's Office policies, isn't it permissible for a deputy to actually arc a taser as a threat of a use of force?
Maybe. Where?
Well, it doesn't seem to be working too well. Before I get into that question, can you just explain to the jury what arcing a taser is, just for their own benefit?
Arcing a taser is cycling the taser without its prongs being discharged. It makes the sound, but it doesn't make any contact.
Is it a rather loud sound?
Yes, it is.
Somewhat startling, maybe?
Yes, it is.
According to Osceola County Sheriff's Office policies, we've already established threatening the use of force is a permissible de-escalation technique, correct?
Correct.
And we established that verbally it's permissible, correct?
Correct.
But even going a step farther than verbally threatening force, it is permissible under Sheriff's Office policies to actually demonstrate that arcing to a resisting suspect in order to try to gain compliance, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Now, after the fires were all extinguished, do you know whether Mr. Barreto Bayerga was placed in handcuffs?
Yes, I do.
Do you know who placed the handcuffs on him?
I don't recall.
Do you recall whether you instructed your trainee to place handcuffs on him?
Yes, it was either me or my trainee. I don't recall. After we watched the body camera.
And why did you place him in handcuffs at that time?
To effect the arrest, to detain him, to prevent him from fleeing further.
Okay. Now, just to be clear, Deputy Crawford did not place him in handcuffs, correct?
Correct.
I can just have one moment, Judge. I'll check my notes. I have no questions, Judge.
Ms. Walker, any redirect?
Nothing further, this witness can be used.
All right, thank you, sir. You may sit down.
Judge, may you remain under subpoena again for calling?
Yes, detective, please remain under the subpoena. Okay, you just have to recall. Thank you. The state may call its next witness.
State recall Detective Kayla Ruiz.